Hello, Mark Sudduth, HurricaneTrack.com, here with your Hurricane Pro and HD video blog for the 17th of June, 2013. Tropical Depression 2 formed earlier today down here in the Gulf of Honduras, and now it is very close to the coastline in Belize. It'll be on the shore in the next couple of hours, and the circulation will be disrupted. It'll weaken, and there's really not much room for it to get over the Bay of Campeche here, according to the latest forecast track from the National Hurricane Center. So it's kind of iffy as to whether or not this will make it to tropical storm intensity. It certainly had a favorable environment to work with, very warm water temperatures here in the Western Caribbean, a favorable upper level outflow pattern, and a sufficiently unstable atmosphere with juicy, moist, tropical air to work with. But land is a big no-no for tropical cyclones. It does not like land, this depression, and neither do any tropical cyclones for that matter, and it'll probably weaken. It's hard to weaken much more than where it is. If you have a very strong hurricane and it interacts with land, it obviously takes a big punch out of it, whereas a depression such as this is already fairly weak, and so there's not much more weakening it can do, right? So, it's already on the low end of the scale, but there's enough rugged terrain, the landmass itself being frictional as compared to the ocean, that it'll disrupt that circulation just enough. And if it doesn't get back out over the Bay of Campeche, which is this area right in here, then it won't have a chance to really strengthen again. So that might be the end of it. Looking at a satellite picture, this is a wide shot of the western Atlantic basin. You can see the depression located right in here. It formed from a tropical wave that itself moved across the Atlantic through the Caribbean and then finally developed in a favorable area right there in the Western Caribbean, which is the climatologically favored region in this part of the hemisphere for this part of the hurricane season. No surprise there. It is a little bit unusual, though, to have two tropical cyclones develop in the month of June in the Atlantic Basin. We don't see that very often, and if this gets a name, that'll be quite unusual to have two named storms in the month of June. But again, it is really going to have to try to gain some latitude and cut across the Bay of Campeche there, a very small area of water to work with. Small, but that water is warm. This is a close-up satellite shot. Center of circulation right here, just getting onto the coast of Belize. It had a fairly well-defined band earlier today. Now the clouds are starting to break up a little bit. Circulation is going to be moving over land. Again, the frictional effects. That disrupts these systems, believe it or not, even though the clouds are several thousand feet above the ocean and the landmass. You still have that frictional slowdown of the air coming in, and it causes a disruption, kind of like messing up the inflow of your engine on your car. It won't work as well if you disrupt the airflow in an engine, for example. Now the water that it's going to try to work with, the water temperatures over here, nice and warm, but the question is it going to be able to come out and clip the Bay of Campeche, or is it going to stay inland over mainland southeast Mexico and just die away? We'll have to wait and see. The forecast calls for just that little area of the Bay of Campeche to be crossed. Upper level winds fairly favorable for the system to develop. You have that anticyclonic flow aloft for the most part, light upper level winds for it to work with. So it does have an opportunity to strengthen the shear. That is the change in wind direction with height in the atmosphere right over the system, 10 knots or less. So fairly favorable upper level winds. As I mentioned, even a decent outflow channel up on the north side, and there's even an upper level low sitting off to the east, which can help to foster that outflow, the air being pulled away from the system after it rises up through the convective process. Water temperatures, as I mentioned, definitely not an issue for this system where it's headed if it can cross into the Bay of Campeche. Water temps in the low to mid 80s easily. But again, it's just a matter of, does it gain enough latitude to get out over the water just enough to become Tropical Storm Barry, or is this it? And the system will stay a depression only, and then finally a remnant low over southeast Mexico. We'll have to wait and see. Now, why, if you may be asking, isn't this going to come up into the United States, even South Texas, which is obviously part of the United States, but why isn't this going to be a threat to the U.S. Gulf Coast here. Well, this is the system down here, the tropical depression, and this is the 850 millibar or 5,000 foot chart off the GFS. And what you see here is a very well-defined outline of a ridge of high pressure extending all the way across from Africa, all the way across the Atlantic, into and beyond the Gulf of Mexico there. Take the telestration away, and you can see that outline pretty well. Now, this is thicker air. That air is thicker in the atmosphere. It's like a large, warm water balloon, if you will. And then this is a much smaller, less dense water balloon, and it can't just cut through like that. It doesn't work that way with the way that the fluid atmosphere behaves. Instead, the stream flow for our tropical depression is pretty much like this. It's going to follow the outline of this large ridge of high pressure. That's the general, simple way to explain it. There's no mechanism or no reason in the physical atmosphere for this to just turn north and come up to Florida, for example, or Louisiana or Texas, because you got this ridge of high pressure nosing its way in there, blocking this from turning north. So it has no choice but to go on a west-northwest track around the southwest side of that high and on into mainland Mexico over the next few days. Later in the year, when we have troughs digging in, eroding away at this ridge, then it's not there. That wall isn't there, and these things can turn north. But for now, as we move on through this part of the summer, early to mid part of summer, these ridges can be pretty strong and not allow for much northward movement. So that's why it's not going to bother the U.S. Everything else is nice and quiet, including the eastern Pacific, so that's good news. And we'll see what happens with the depression, whether or not it makes it out over the Bay of Campeche. It will be a big rainmaker for Central America, and that is an impact that needs to be respected. Heavy, heavy rainfall can cause mudslides, landslides, flash flooding, and just general miserable conditions with too much rain over too short a period of time. So please keep an eye on that. If you have interest in the region, that is an issue, right? That's one of the impacts. All right, well, that's it for today. Again, I am Mark Sudduth, HurricaneTrack.com, my site, and it is also my privilege to be able to do these videos for you. Hopefully you learn something from them. I'll be back again tomorrow with another update for you.